Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast. The Doctor is in series. This is episode 277. I'm Chris Hadnaghi, CEO and founder of Social Engineer, the Innocent Lives Foundation, and the Institute for Social Engineering. And this podcast has been around for a really long time, like 2009. And as always, because it is the Doctor is in series, we need our resident doctor, Dr. Abbie. Nice to have you on the show today, and welcome back.
Great to be here, Chris. I'm Dr. Abbie Maroño. I'm a behavioral scientist and a behavioral analysis expert and the director of education at Social Engineer. Chris confuses me every time I do my intro.
I didn't even do anything.
Now I don't even know my intro.
I didn't even do anything.
You just had to exist in this space, and it confused me.
Also, Abbie is very addicted to peanut butter cookies right now, so there might be some cookie talk on this podcast. Just saying. Okay. This episode is sponsored by peanut butter cookies. No, I'm just kidding. It's sponsored by. Abbie. Social Engineer is the sponsor, as always. And if you are listening to this, it is month October. Guess what's happening this month? HubieCon. So if you want to see Dr. Abbie, myself, and Joe Navarro all teaching a wonderfully one-day version of the Human Behavior Conference, and you can be here in Orlando at Rollins College at the Rice Pavilion on October 30th. You can find out more information at humanbehaviorcon.com, and you can join us there. Also, if you are interested in the topic of social engineering, you should be in our Slack channel, because we have over, I think, 1,500 people in there now talking about this topic every day, from pre-texting to phishing and vishing to people just getting in the industry. We even have a job board where we've had a lot of people find different types of employment. I think almost a dozen, 10 or 11 now, have found employment. Companies are in there looking for hiring. So you can come on in if you're interested in a legal, family-friendly chat on social engineering. And that sounds like us. The link is in the show notes. And if you don't see it, just ping Abbie or I on LinkedIn and we'll get it to you. Also, we want to invite everyone to join us at innocentlivesfoundation.org. We have a lot of really cool things coming out there. Abbie, when's the book coming out?
Don't ask me that.
Okay. I thought it was this month, like the month of October, isn't it?
You and I have stuff that we haven't done for it yet.
Well, anyway,
so it's us.
Even if we don't, even if we don't have a date, here's the great part. Abbie has written a children's book, and it is, we can answer this. What is the title of it?
Lily the Brave Lion.
Yeah. And it's really phenomenal. And it's geared towards helping children learn like what's good and bad and how to report things if they feel unsafe. So it's going to be a really powerful tool for parents to use, those who are listening here that were looking for that kind of information. And Dr. Abbie's been writing the Doctor's Corner on the ILF website. So if you're dealing with things like shame, or you're dealing with any kind of depression or stress due to having been a victim of some of these things, there's a lot of great information in the Doctor's Corner. So you go to innocentlivesfoundation.org. You can find out all sorts of resources there, and you can support us through donating if you would like, as we're a 501c3 charity. So we can definitely use it as we move forward. And last but not least, if you like the music on the show, it is none other than the band Clutch. Go check them out at clutchmerch.com. They're nice enough to have given us the music to use on the podcast. And as everyone knows, Neil, the lead singer, helped me start ILF almost 7 years ago. So we are big fans of them here. If you like this episode, give us a heart, thumbs, like, whatever it is on the platform you're on. And please keep your comments and suggestions coming in. Abbie and I really do enjoy them, and we answer every comment. And your suggestions have made quite a few episodes, the titles and themes of quite a few episodes. Now, Abbie, normally we just have a topic we talk about. So what is our theme for today?
So our theme today is authenticity.
But you invited a special guest to be here with us in addition to that. So let me just introduce our guest, and then we can talk about why he's here with us. So Judd Shaw is an adventurer, storyteller, and agent of change, blending his background as a lawyer and president of Judd Shaw Injury Law with a passion for human connection. With over 2 decades in law, Judd initially chased professional success only to discover its hollow rewards without genuine human bonds. Through introspection, therapy, and collaboration with professionals, Judd developed the Connection Cure Framework, a compass guiding individuals toward authentic connections, essential for deep, meaningful relationships. As a celebrated keynote speaker on authenticity and vulnerability, Judd shares his transformative journey to inspire others. As a proud father and advocate for personal growth, Judd continues to champion authenticity, urging others to embark on their own path to fulfillment through genuine connection and self-discovery. So I think it's very evident why you're here, Judd. Thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
So I just want to start off with a really interesting journey to go from law to human, authentic human connection. How did you get that path?
It's not such a quantum leap, because what was underlying in the job of being a lawyer was success, power, validation, attention. And so when I went to pursue the field of law, at that time, I really had thought about what professions are really successful, what professions are really respectful, what professions get attention and you can make money and you can drive success and you can even make change. And so at that time, I went into law because I went into external validation. And so for me, the career gave me a way to get that validation. And so it really wasn't about the law. I never went into law thinking that I was going to be changing the Constitution, getting into politics, or even wanting to be in front of the Supreme Court. I wanted my face on a billboard. I wanted to be known. And so going into law, just like building my personal brand, was all about connection. It just flipped in how I got it.
That's a very honest answer, to be able to openly say, like, you only did law so you can have your face on a billboard. That's an interesting perspective. Haven't heard many guests actually openly talk like that. So thank you. Kudos to you for that. So when you realized, as we said in the intro of you, that this kind of was hollow, then what made you then jump to this, to like, this seems like even though you say there's a connection because of what your desires were, but kind of going from legal, that you said was hollow and not fulfilling, to creating like a connection cure framework?
That's a great question. What happened was, as a lawyer, I can help others. As an injury lawyer, I was able to help people hurt in accidents at no fault of their own. And we were really good at it. And so the helping part was there, that service component. And I fed off that. But I was always feeding off of that in the way that the more people I could help, maybe the more lovable I would feel. The more people that saw me on a billboard, maybe I'm more valued, more heard, and certainly more seen. And so what happened was, that became my new addiction. I was addicted to drugs at one point. I had unhealthy coping mechanisms from childhood trauma and unhealed attachment styles. And so I really went through life barreling in ways that I needed to be the loudest in the room so that I felt heard. I needed people to recognize me so I felt lovable. And as many of us know, at the root of that is a dark night. And that dark night was coming because my life was, on one side, wild success, and on the other side, absolute chaos. And throughout those years of being a lawyer, I needed more and more validation, because interestingly, the more I felt loved, the more I wanted to feel loved. But that love was coming from the external side of, oh, Judd, you won that case. Judd, thank you so much. Judd, aren't you the guy on the billboard? And so because that's not sustainable, joy, peace, and in connection, I got to a point where I reached all the successes, all the pinnacles that one may measure external success by: yachts, private jets, fancy cars. And yet, towards the end of my real struggle, there were nights that at the end of a day, I'd win a case and I'd represent clients and we signed up new cases. And then I go and my kids would be put to sleep, and my ex-wife We had an unhealthy relationship. She enabled unhealthy behavior because she didn't want change. And so that allowed me to then leave at night and find the sketchiest, weirdest neighborhoods that I could find and do meth all night. And then I'd wake up. I wouldn't wake up. I never went to bed. I'd shower, wash my face, see my kids in the morning. My ex knew where I was. And yet I'd go off to work and there it would be, hey, Jimmy, hey, Sally, hey, Smith, whatever. And it would repeat and repeat. And that was my life, because what had happened was, at the end of reaching all of the success that I had, I then felt the loneliest and most disconnected I ever was. And I was saying to myself, how is this possible? I bought into what everybody told me. You told me work hard, do this, go to the, and then I'm going to have all the happiness and the joy in my life. And then I'm surrounded by the smell of Italian leather in my garage while I lay on the floor and cry and think about ending my life.
Mm-hmm.
And there I said to myself, there's got to be more to this. This can't be all there is. How can I be this unhappy when everybody on the outside would go, oh, this guy's got it going on. You want to be this guy. And in fact, when I drove by you in a Ferrari and you looked over, I wanted you to see me. I needed you to see me. But on that garage floor, I finally contemplated maybe ending my life. This can't be worth it, I thought. And I did something that I had never done before. I put the shame aside and I asked for help. I called a friend, and what that friend did was they gave compassion and grace. And he shared with me, you need to get help. And I knew I did. And so I went off and I went to a rehab. And after rehab, I went on a healing journey. I wanted to learn everything there was about anything in personal growth and wellness space, from cold plunges and plant medicine to therapies and talk and EMDR, whatever you told me. If it was like, go get bit by a wasp and sit in a tree and upside down, I was like, okay, I'll try it. If you telling me, I just needed to get better. And I did. And then about 2 years after this deep transformation, I thought to myself, what if I could reverse engineer my healing? How am I now the happiest, the most joyful, the most peaceful I've ever been in my life? How then can I help others just like I helped at my law firm? But now I can help others in a different impact, in a way that I can say, I know where you are and I know the way out. And the reason is because I've been down there before too.
I got a question for you, Abbie, but before that, does your framework involve getting stung by wasps? Because I'm not in, if that's the case.
My framework leaves it open to find how you best renew your connections with yourself.
No
wasps. If wasps not your thing, then
they're definitely not my thing.
They're definitely neither of our things.
Yeah, firstly, I appreciate you so much sharing that with us.
Yes.
There is so much to that I wish we could just dive in for hours to all those different points. And I think it's very clear why I wanted Judd as our guest. And although I'm biased, Judd is one of my favorite people on this planet, and you will very quickly recognize why. But there's a few points that I really want to pick up on here. And I think it's so important, especially for young listeners, to hear what you just said about, you had all of the things that we're told mean success. We're told that success looks like money, and success looks like cars, and success looks like billboards. And we're told these are the things that when you get them, you'll have some value. And when you get them, you'll be happy. And there's this race, and we see it on social media where everybody's, showing off their cars and saying, if you do this, you'll get a car like me. And once you get these cars or get this house or get this thing, you'll finally be successful. But what that's doing is saying, if you fit this mold, then you will finally be worth something. And that's kind of the antithesis of authenticity, because it's saying this is what it looks like and this is what you need to do. And that's saying you can't be yourself. You can't take an authentic route to get to success because this is what it should look like. And for young people, especially listening to this, where they're on social media and they see everybody racing their cars and talking about, what it means to be successful and, comparing incomes and all of this pressure, for them to hear this, that I had all of those things and it didn't make me happy because it wasn't authentic, because I wasn't actually living as the authentic version of me, I think is really powerful.
I want to back up for a second, because we always do this, Abbie, and we didn't do it this time. From a psychological perspective, let's define authenticity.
Yes. So authenticity is basically being true to oneself and genuine in interactions. It's extensively studied in fields mostly like psychology, but in leadership and organizational behavior. But it really just means having that self-awareness that your behavior matches your belief systems, your morals, you're acting with. Also, integrity is largely related, but you're behaving in a way that is consistently genuine across the board.
Okay, so just to kind of make it clear, because you used words like integrity and things like that. So genuine, but there's going to be we're talking about people with I don't want to say higher moral standard or something. That may be the wrong phrasing, but we're not talking about people authentically evil, right? We're trying to promote the good side of this.
I mean, so authentic technically can be bad because it's not neither good nor bad. It just means it's consistent with oneself. So I'm not trying to pretend to be someone I'm not. I'm not trying to pretend that I have a belief system that I don't. I'm not trying to pretend that I have a moral code that I don't. I genuinely have developed those things. And that's why it looks so different for everybody else. Because Chris, what's authentic to me and what's authentic to Judd and what's authentic to you are going to be very different. If our religious beliefs differ, if our passions differ, if our education levels differ, it's going to change how we see ourselves and how we view ourselves. Also, our emotional intensity, how nurturing we are, how introverted, extroverted, our personality, all these things connect together to make us who we are. So when I act in a way that I'm like, oh, I didn't feel good about that, and I didn't want to do that, and I didn't want to say that, but I did it because I felt like I had to, that isn't authentic because it goes against my sense of self.
So Judd, with that definition in mind, how does that play a role in your healing framework?
Abbie mentioned something that was really important, which is, to my heart, what's happening with our young men, and particularly teenagers and young 20-year-olds. And before I answer that, Chris, I wanted to point the fact that, masculinity isn't toxic. What's toxic in masculinity is that danger, where our young men are experiencing women who no longer need us to provide in the way that we once did. And young men are the struggle of the patriarchy that has gone on for so long. It's not their fault, but it's their responsibility to change. But sometimes it feels like their fault. And so they go online and they're literally searching, what does it mean to be a man?
Yeah.
And then they find the Andrew Tates of the world who say, hey, your life sucks, doesn't it? I know the way out. And the first thing is, screw the women. Yeah. And you'll have fancy cars and you'll have the plane. You won't. And that's the toxic, because then they find each other and that becomes like a wolf pack, a sense of belonging in the wrong way. And so, and young men are our highest suicide rates reported among all disconnected, people. And so it's scary. And it reminds, me of growing up of a sense of identity. What does that look like? I mean, I know that if I wore a beads, my father would be like, you're you're and I struggled with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wait, I don't, that's not adding up for me. Mm-hmm. And later on in life, I realized that wearing my beads and being me, being authentic, meant that I felt like a man more than ever.
Right.
And so in the framework, the connection cure, C for conscious awareness, U for understanding where these masks that we wear come from. Renewing is the R, renewing the connection first with yourself and with others. And then expanding, that's the E in cure, your authentic connections with others and creating a ripple effect. Mm-hmm. And so that really falls under the first step, which is conscious awareness. Understanding that, I'm showing up differently in this group of people than I am with this group of people. Which is the real mask and which am I faking? And why can we be genuine with some people, but not genuine with others? Where does that come from? And so I think, to Dr. Abbie's point, it requires an awareness that, I'm not showing up real and raw in this moment. And then going on to understand what's behind that. Why am I doing it?
So Dr. Abbie and I have talked about this a lot on this particular show. Childhood trauma, which you said you had too. Both of us have been through some pretty horrific things. How important in your framework is it that someone is able to own that, maybe some really bad things happened out of your control that you had no ability to stop, but it sounds like you need to be able to own that before you can even start healing?
Well, I like to say that you can start healing at any time. You could start by just wanting to be healed. You've already started it. And so my framework isn't going to heal childhood trauma. I was abused when I was young, and that required different forms of therapy and still does. I'm still working through finding compassion and forgiveness in that. And so what the connection cure is more about is being able to reconnect with yourself. A way to know which Judd is the real Judd. When I'm showing up differently in group A and B, who is this Judd? Are neither really Judd? And really understanding yourself to get to embrace your power and learn about the things that trigger you and the things that move you and the things that say, like, give you the F, yes, I'm doing this. Right? And that's what the cure is about, because once you're able to shed the masks and get to your authentic version, then you can heal those parts within you that are still wounded.
Yeah, I think that's such a nice point, leading on from what you said about men's mental health as well, because we have all these ideas of who we need to be, what we should be, and we're being told, like you said, the Andrew Tates of the world, where we're constantly being told that this is what a man looks like. This is what a woman looks like. This is what success looks like. We have these ideas of this is the mold that you have to fit, which is that antithesis of authenticity. But how do you know? Because if you're trying to be this thing, if you don't have a great sense of self-awareness, it's really difficult to say, actually, no, that isn't what a man is, because there's so much pressure. And that's why it's really interesting. But research has shown that a lack of self-awareness is a significant barrier to authenticity, because when you're constantly being told all of these things are what you should believe in and what you should do, without a clear understanding of your own values, beliefs, and emotions, it's really hard to know who your true self is. So if you work on increasing self-awareness through things like reflection and feedback and mindfulness and, the journey that Judd took, you can learn to understand what it is that you actually like. And an important point too, Chris, you brought up about childhood trauma. When individuals go through early difficult childhood experiences, as well as those societal influences later on, it can lead us to be really self-critical. The Andrew Tates are telling me that this is what success looks like, but I don't actually like those things and I don't want those things. So we hold ourselves to these unrealistic standards and we say, well, my true self isn't good enough because it doesn't fit this mold of what I should be. So we feel this internal pressure to meet those expectations. So we inhibit authentic behavior and constantly strive to meet these self-imposed standards instead of expressing our genuine self. How would you recommend someone to really break that barrier? Because to make that first jump to say, actually, I don't want to fit this mold. I want to be me. I want to really live as me. That's such a hard thing to do, especially because there's so much self-criticism and there's shame on both sides for both men and women. But the shame largely is directed at men when it comes to things like masculinity, especially. So what would you advise people would be a really good first step to recognizing, to make that move towards your authentic self?
Get your ass kicked and get into a dark night of your soul. Sometimes it's our failures. Sometimes it's our biggest struggles that finally move us and give us the energy to create the change. And to your point, I remember being in a case and I was a mad dog litigator, right? And I'm lawyering up here. And I remember after my argument, before the mediator, I walk out and the lawyer follows me to my car and he puts his hand on my car and he says to me, Judd, you don't have to be such a jerk. You don't have to take this Viking approach and like where you're killing the women and raping children and scorching the earth. And like, I put my pants on one leg at a time like you, and I have a client like you, and you're making me look really bad for my client. And I said to him, if you don't take your hand off my door, I'm going to slam it in my car. What a
yeah.
But that's the point. I thought like, I'm doing what I'm doing. Hey, I just got on another billboard. I'm making a TV commercial. What do you know about what not? Get your hand off my car. And that wasn't the point of his message. And today I would probably stop to say, you're right. I'm sorry. That was uncalled for. I didn't need to take that approach. And I appreciate that you have a client and probably a family that you're trying to feed through this career. It's not my job to ruin it. Sorry about that. I appreciate you pointing that out. Sometimes the best awareness comes from other people, and I think that it is difficult. It's difficult, particularly when we're caught up in our own stuff.
Yeah.
But my experience is the more you struggle against that universe, the more you're feeling like you're swimming upstream, the more, the cosmic is telling you you're in the wrong direction. And for me, it was my dark night that motivated me enough.
I love that you went to the negative emotions instead of the positive, because people often shy away from talking about the negative stuff, talking about the hard work. And Chris and I recently had a podcast where we talked about healing. And I said that we see this idea of what healing is, and it's all daisies and roses and wonderful, and everyone's holding hands and skipping to their self-growth journey. And that's what we see online. But the reality is that it's actually extremely hard and it's painful. And most of our learning lessons come from the really dark times. And my growth came from my darkest moments, from deep, painful feelings of shame that made me feel worthless. But when I listened to them and what they were telling me, that's where I got growth from. And those moments where we do bad behaviors and we are at rock bottom, or we're just in a really bad state, that's where the growing happens. It doesn't always have to, but things don't often change without a really significant trigger. And when we shy away from saying that it's our failures and it's that pain and it's the negative emotion that authenticity often comes from, when we shy away from that, we give people this really misdirected view of healing, that it is easy and that it's just this choice that we make and go, okay, well, I'm going to be authentic me. That's going to be really fun. It's going to be really easy. And no, fighting against those stereotypical ideas of success and masculinity is hard. And it does come with a lot of self-criticism. And usually that point where you realize, this version of me isn't working, that rarely ever comes from happiness and joy. Typically, it comes from those dark times.
So, Judd, there's a balance, though, because in this day and age, right, you talk about trying to find authentic masculinity, avoiding toxic masculinity. There's also I feel that Abbie and I have talked about this, the real need for the Me Too movement to have happened. But now we also see it getting weaponized, which creates fear in trying to be authentic, right? So how do you suggest people find that balance in this world where it seems like, I was just on a phone call before this podcast and I was chatting with this woman who we had as a guest here. And she was telling me some of the struggles her child is going through in school. He's only 11. And it's because her family and this other family have different political views. So now the children aren't allowed to be friends, right? They're not allowed to be friends because the parents have different political views. Like, so now we're telling our children, like, you have to hate this kid over here, this other 11-year-old, because he doesn't agree with the way we think. Now, she was baffled by this, right? That this is what's happening. How do we tell people to find that balance when you're in a world where like almost anything you say can get you canceled or killed even?
It's scary. You know, in 2019, I was going through a real rough patch with my ex. And at one point, she wants my phone and I'm not giving her my phone. She goes in the other room and she comes back and I hear her calling the police. She calls the police, says that I grabbed her, and I got really upset about that because I knew that that was not true. And so I left. I left the apartment knowing that the police would probably be coming. And they came and she gave a report. And later, I get a copy of a report telling me that there was a warrant out for my arrest because I didn't show up. I sent it to my wife, who's my ex-wife now, and she wrote me an email saying that she was terribly sorry that she did that her father and her father's lawyer told her what to say because they wanted her to divorce me.
Whoa.
And that her telling that story knew that that would help her in the divorce case. And she wrote this in an email. Well, a few months later, I was driving by my office and I get pulled over. And sure enough, police officer says you have a warrant for your arrest. And now I'm sitting in jail with a ham sandwich and an orange jumpsuit for real. The scariest moment in my life. Looking on the top of a bunk bed by myself in a cell with a little slit window, watching a bird eventually fly by every once in a while. And I couldn't believe that my freedom had been taken that way. That I had been able to be accused of something I didn't do. And now I was in jail as a result of it. And she, of course, did not cooperate with the prosecutors. She lawyered up. The lawyer and the prosecutor, ultimately the prosecutor dropped the charges. And he went to the judge and he said, we don't really believe this happened. We don't have any evidence to it. And so we need to drop the charges. And the judge said to me, Mr. Shaw, I'm sorry this happened to you. I'm going to expunge your record right here and now. And from this point on, you can actually affirmatively answer that you've never been arrested, that this event never happened. And I thought in my head, but it did. But it did happen. You can expunge your record, but not the memory of it.
Mm-hmm.
I know what happened. And talking about being weaponized, it's scary. And what it does is it's terrifying to make further connections. It's who can I trust then? If there was no psychological safety anymore, that I could go to jail by just sleeping in my own home, where can I find safety? And that is the moment in which I left jail and found myself on my garage floor crying, thinking about killing myself.
I don't even know where to go from there. That's so insanely deep, Judd. Wow. I think I just need a minute for that one. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Pretty powerful statement. Seems like sometimes, I'm sorry, go ahead, Abbie.
It really exemplifies what a lot of men's worst fears are. You know, there's on both sides, there's a fear from women that something will happen to them. And there's a fear from men that they will be claimed, that something happens to them.
Yeah.
And it's a really hard thing to overcome. And, you know, I want to ask you, what step by step can someone do to stop that happening to them? But I know that isn't the reality. I know the reality is it's much harder than that, you know, because you want to trust people, you want to be around people. And the only answer really is, you know, don't be alone with people. So my advice on that is to have some kind of protection. If you are a high profile man, trying to be cautious with meetings being recorded, and making sure that you're not putting anyone in a situation that they're uncomfortable with. If it is a private meeting, checking they're okay, getting evidence. I'm not an expert on this situation. Judd, from your experience after going through that kind of thing, did you ever find anything moving forward in your business as a leader, a way to protect yourself that still allowed you to be an authentic leader, but provided a little bit of safety?
Yes. Actually, there were a few things we did at the workplace. One is made sure that we had cameras in most places of the office. We also know that when certain situations come up, even at my workplace between other employees, there was a process for really fairly understanding that before jumping to any judgment. In fact, there was an associate attorney once who had made an allegation on another employee of my firm who's not an attorney, and that this person was sort of like coming on to her. And she described one incident that happened, and what our chief operating officer did in a team is went right to the camera and captured that moment and realized that moment happened very differently than she said. And so now, because of that, we were able to have a conversation with her, which ultimately led to her leaving the firm. She realized that she had lied and got caught. And also the importance of not reacting quickly in these situations as a leader. Get all the information, talk to people, even have them write out, tell me your story and write this out and sign it. So they feel that they realize you're being held to this statement. This is something that's serious that you're saying. But I also wanted to acknowledge something that was really important about my story. And that was, although I didn't do anything to end up in jail in that moment, I was far from innocent in my life. And it was like, but I, in a way, still got myself to this state, to this place. It was my nights of meth, my terrors in yelling at the office, my inconsistent Judd that would show up and create the opposite of psychological safety for many of my employees who didn't know, is this the guy who's going to show up and I can admit to a mistake, or is this guy going to come in and he's just going to fire 5 people just to make a scene? And so in a way, my life was creating chaos for other people's lives. You know, they say a bad boss follows you everywhere you go, even when you're home. You can't turn off those thoughts, those frustrations and irritants about your work or your boss, even when you're just trying to rest at home. They play in your head. That bad boss follows you wherever you go. And so I created issues and made problems worse, not better. And so while I was sitting in that jail cell, what I realized was I don't belong here for the reason that I was sent. But I was far from innocent in being this person who's truly helping humanity and not hurting it. And I think I was contributing to the toxic masculinity. And it was that darkness where my light came out and shined brightest.
That's a really interesting point. That when we are trying to fit different molds and we're doing it at the expense of other people, it feels like, well, this is fine because I'm winning and I'm being successful and I'm getting all these things. So we don't often think about what we leave behind us and the reputation and the way we make other people feel. But when bad things happen, it's often the accumulation of minor bad behaviors that we have conducted, the way we make people feel. Because if you're accused of something and you have treated everybody so poorly around you, it's not a far leap for them to say, well, he probably did it because this is how he's made me feel. So it is a really important point that although that is still completely unfair and that isn't justice, it's important that we are treating other people with kindness and we're not trying to get to where we want to be at the expense of other people. Because when we do leave this trail of hurt people, it will come back to us. It will get back to us in a bad way that isn't a way to move forward, because reputation really does speak wonders.
Hurt people.
Yeah.
I think, Judd, what's amazing to me in this whole story is that despite this awful person you say you were, you had a friend that you knew you can call that was going to show you compassion and grace and help you the way you needed to be helped. I think that's a powerful part of your journey, is because having that one person in your life is probably what saved your life.
Yes.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think we can probably talk for hours. I feel like I can talk for you for hours, but we have made our podcast to be like 45 minutes because people seem to consume that. But we need to have you back and talk more. You are a fascinating individual. If people that are listening want to find out more about you, how can they do that? What's the best way?
Go to juddshaw.com, and that's where I call the Juddverse. My whole universe lives. You'll find I write children's picture books like Abbie. Mine are called Sterling the Knight, teaching children social and emotional skills that they need growing up.
Beautiful. Such
as empathy and fairness. My law firm, Judd Shaw Injury Law. But everything's there is at juddshaw.com. You can find my podcast, Behind the Armor, the books, the workshops, and my keynote speaking that I'm working on. Also, I encourage everybody to follow me at Judd Shaw Official on social media. And we put out a lot of tips and things on our subject on authenticity and how to remove the mask and show up real and raw.
I love it. This is great. I honestly can't thank you enough for coming on the show. This was probably one of my favorites. It's really.
Well, Chris, it's an honor to be here. And I'll tell you that every time I have these conversations, every time I can acknowledge that I was arrested, every time I can acknowledge that I had to leave my kids in the middle of the night and go do meth, and every time I can acknowledge that I was a jerk boss, it removes a little bit more of the shame that kept me from being the best version I am now.
I love it. It's like Abbie's book that just came out. A lot of topics in there really cover getting past that shame. So very fitting. I understand now, Abbie, why he is one of your favorite people. It makes clear sense. Thank you for getting Judd on, Abbie. And thank you, Judd, for being our guest this month. Dr. Abbie for next month has chosen the topic of bullying. So something very current right now that we do need to discuss. So we'll be having a pretty deep discussion about that next month. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you found this conversation as powerful, as enlightening, as uplifting as I did. Until next month, stay safe. See you.